Imagine being able to perform parts of a song instead of just pressing play, and being able to add your own creative twist to it. I'm Joey for Digital DJ Tips, and from the hundreds upon hundreds of questions that we've received about Traktor's remix decks, we decided to create a training series. If you're one of those people who asked us, what is a remix deck? Or, I bought some hardware already, but I still don't know how to use it. Well, this series is for you. In this first video, we're going to define what remix decks are. In the next one, we're going to show you why they're cool and why you need to use them during your live performance. And lastly, in the third video, we're going to show you how you can do exactly that. In this first video, we're going to discuss what remix decks really are. Next, we're going to talk about remix sets and how they interface with a remix deck. And lastly, we're going to talk about what kind of hardware you can use to take full advantage of them. I guarantee by the end of this very short video, you're gonna know exactly what a remix deck is. So let's get started. So what exactly is a remix deck? Well, the best way to describe them is to picture a grid containing 4 columns and 4 rows. In each of those cells, you can have any kind of audio that you want, whether it's a one-shot sample, a loop, or even an entire song. Remix decks take over the normal Traktor track deck, meaning you still have access to all the transfer controls like play, pause, pitch, bend, or tempo. You can even scratch with a controller if you want. But what really sets remix decks apart from a normal track deck is that you can launch all of those audio clips within the remix decks individually, essentially letting you be able to create edits, remixes, and dropping a sample or two on the fly. With remix decks, you can add as little or as much as you want, whenever you want. What are remix sets? Well, remix sets are audio packs that you can download which contain songs that have been broken down into individual elements. Stuff like drums, percussion, bass, synthesizers, or even some effects. Think of them as DLCs, or downloadable content, which you can use to fill up your remix decks. They're a bit like the sample packs that you can buy online when you're writing a song, but this time they come pre-prepared, so all you have to do is to drop them in your remix deck and you're good to go for a live performance. You can get remix sets over at the Native Instruments website or at their partner sites like Beatport. If this all sounds a little too familiar, well, that's because it is. Remix decks are a lot like grid-based production software like Ableton Live, with the difference being you don't need to launch a separate piece of software just to use them. That's right, remix decks are found within Traktor Pro too. Further, they were designed for live performances instead of being a studio production tool, making them a lot simpler and easier to use for us DJs, which of course is a great thing. Now that we've talked about remix decks and remix sets, it's time to discuss what hardware you need in order to take control of them. The truth is, you don't need an extra piece of kit. You could just use your mouse. But most people will want a separate hardware controller which takes control of the remix decks, much in the same way that a DJ uses a DJ controller for a live performance instead of just using a mouse and keyboard. For people that want a tight one-to-one integration that works straight out the box, Native Instruments makes a controller called the Traktor Control F1, which I have right here. As you can see, it has a 4x4 grid, which is very useful for launching those clips. It's important to note that remix decks actually have 64 cells, so that means there are 3 more pages of 4x4 grids in here. You can access those using this encoder knob over here. Aside from that, it also has 4 volume faders for adjusting the line levels and 4 filter knobs as well. Certainly more than enough control for your remix decks. It's also important to note that this will work alongside any DJ controller that you may have right now. Truth is, it can even stand on its own. You don't need an extra piece of hardware. It's just this. You can plug it in, take control of the remix decks, and go on and play live. So that's really nice. You can actually use any kind of DJ controller to take control of the remix decks, as long as it's MIDI class compliant. All you have to do is to download the appropriate mapping. One such third-party device, which I think fits the bill perfectly, is this MIDI fighter from DJ Tech Tools. Like the Control F1, it has a 4x4 button grid here as well, although it does lack some controls such as the volume faders and the filters. But if you check out the mapping, there are some workarounds that address these functions. So I suggest taking a look at it if you're using something like this. So that concludes the first episode in our training series. I hope you found it informative and that you understand by now what remix decks are. In the next episode, we're going to talk about why you should incorporate remix decks in your DJing. What are the benefits to using it? How can it help you stand out from other DJs and help you create your own unique sound? And lastly, we're going to tackle the big question on everybody's mind. Is it for me? All that and more in the next episode in our training series. I'm Joey for Digital DJ Tips. Head on over to digitaldjtips.com for the full tutorial article.